All right, now as far as attachments go, I'll show you in a minute on how I put the cargo receiver up here, or that cargo carrier. It holds 300 pounds. This frame absolutely will hold the 300 pounds. I've already tested it. I'm not saying everybody's golf cart does that. This is just my setup. But with what I've done here, it secures that load really well. Now, since the receiver is actually butted right up against the top of this plate here, when you bring in a normal hitch, they usually are, you know, they have the 2-inch shank, but then they get wider at the end. So some things will actually hit up here, and you have to take that into account. So for example, I get these from Harbor Freight. They're just a 2-inch receiver D-ring. This is the one that I keep in my truck for, this is actually in my little snow recovery kit. People just don't know how to drive around here in North Carolina, so every winter, I'm always pulling somebody out of a ditch or up a hill. So I throw this in the back of my truck, and I've got a tow strap. It works great. But you notice you have the 2-inch shank here, but then you have this end plate. This does not fit nicely in here. It won't go back far enough for the hole to align. So what I had to do was I got a second one, and I cut the top. I'll show this one next to it. I cut this top, kind of shaved it down across the top to get this. It's just cut flat, and then I rhino lined the rest of it. But this is my little toe point. I had this strap laying around from a different project that I was working on, and it fit nice on there. And I like the blue; it matches the lug nuts, and it'll match the color scheme. So I like it. It's a nice little bit of flair. But because I shaved the top off, oop, on camera, this slides all the way back, butts up the face to the receiver perfectly. And get it. That was a fiasco. And the pin comes through perfectly. So that's the only modification I had to do to this. And I'll show you the cargo carrier. That also fits in there and actually clears all this. So that's really what I use the 2-inch receiver for. This is something that I used. I originally had the winch in the back of my truck. It was actually in a frame, and it was bolted into the bed. It looked really nice, and I was hooking onto this and pulling the golf cart up into the truck. And this stayed in the truck underneath the cover. Well, if I wanted to put on the snowplow, I needed something to lift and lower it, so I decided to take it out of the back of my truck and put it on the golf cart. So now this is really just on here in case, you know, you could say I need a tow, or what you can do is pull this out, go to a, if you look up 4x4 winching, there's a thing called a snatch block. It's essentially a big pulley that you can anchor off. So you would pull this out, go around the pulley, come back, and hook onto something like this. So it serves its purpose. I've used it once before when my battery was low, and it pulled it up, no problem. Okay, now I got the cargo carrier up here to show you guys. It goes into that 2-inch receiver, and I showed in a previous video. I got this from Harbor Freight, and it has this. I think it's a 3-inch overall riser, and this would be considered something for like an ATV. But this is in, the pin is through the hole underneath there, and it barely clears the front of this fair lead. And that is by design. That is something that if you're going to try and custom do, you have to take everything into account. So if you're going to put this in here, know that your winch might actually prevent you. So make sure you have an overall picture of what the end goal is, and then try to marry everything up well so that you don't have any interference. This actually works out really well. Has no problem clearing the tires, and I've turned it all the way to the left and all the way to the right. The rack does not interfere with it on either side, and I think it says no more than 300 pounds. I'd have to double check that. Don't exceed whatever the manufacturer says, but I can stand on this thing. I've loaded it up. I've put a full Yeti 65 fully loaded with ice and beer and a 100-pound generator on here. This thing carries it no problem. And I'm gonna go ahead and put my weight on this. The golf cart does not actually squat down that much. It just drops probably about an inch. I don't know if you can actually see that, but it's just a little bit. And it handles the load really well, especially how light the front of the golf cart is. That suspension is really stiff from the factory, and there's no, to my knowledge, there's no aftermarket parts for that suspension. So adding some weight up front will actually help your ride, especially at higher speeds. I mentioned it at a later video that this golf cart goes 20 miles an hour top speed. That's a little fast, and I don't suggest going getting the golf cart that fast, especially with a big lift and big tires. It gets squirrely. It likes to, sometimes the ride can get a little scary. Like, it almost feels like you're about to flip it at any second, but adding weight up front will help with that. So at VIR, we'll load up a cooler, and we can go from, they'll let you drive around the track. So, you know, you can load up a cooler and drive around to the different corners at the racetrack and just enjoy the show, and you've got a place to put stuff. And you can still carry people with you, and among other things like chairs. So that's what I've done. Sorry, it's not focusing really well here. That's what I've done. Just be creative. This is just a video of showing you guys what I've done with the Yamaha Drive to really get the most use out of it. And it's fun to be creative. It's fun to fabricate. It's fun to see your work, you know, the finished product, and see it all come together. So get out there, have some fun, try new things, and I don't know, let's see what you got.